talk about climate change all the time. I think that's a wrong term to talk about. It's not climate change anymore. It's a climate crisis. We know that the polar ice caps are melting. We know that the glaciers are receding. We know that there is mass extinction of species happening across the world. Weather patterns are changing, which leads to changes in crop patterns in terms of human development. If you are concerned about this, if you'd like to do something about this, and you want to learn more about how environment works, perhaps the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability might have some answers.
There's a need for more environmental education, professional environmental education. So that's what we will offer. Education about air, water, land, soil, forests, food. All of those are part of our program, and they haven't been touched yet by the programs that we're familiar with. We'll be teaching about an introduction to ecology, which includes biology and population issues. We'll be talking about the connection between environment and economics, political science, social science, geography.
We approach environmental studies from a social science, arts, and humanities perspective. These decisions with regard to climate change or climate crisis are no longer just scientific. They are political, they are economic, they are social. As a result, we are using these perspectives to find out how we can change the environment and how we can build a more sustainable world.
One of our main issues will be climate change and renewable energy. Renewable energy is the only real antidote to climate change, the impacts of climate change, which results in a loss of species, a loss of water, a loss of wood, a loss of croplands through saline intrusion and coastal inundation, a loss of property along the coasts because of coastal inundation. There's a breadth of opportunity that awaits all the graduates of our program. There are tremendous career opportunities in the public sector, the NGO sector, the government work, private corporations, all of which will be focused on environmental improvement and corporate social responsibility. So all of these organizations, including all the corporations, are going to be needing your talent.
At the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, we're looking for talented, hardworking, and intelligent individuals who have a passion for the environment, who have a passion for sustainability. And really, it just takes one person to make the difference.
So with that little video snippet, I welcome you all to this wonderful occasion as we, as I mentioned, celebrate and introspect about the various dimensions of environment, climate change, and sustainability. And just to introduce all of you to the theme of today's World Environment Day seminar is the future of our planet, environment, climate change, and sustainability. It is my absolute pleasure to have on this panel three absolute visionaries who have dealt with environment, who've worked with environment and continue doing so in their everyday lives. And we shall start, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Professor Dr. Armin Rosencranz. He is the founding dean of Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability and an academic who's revered and respected all across the globe. Armin will be delivering his introductory remarks now, and I welcome you, Armin, to deliver your introductory remarks. Over to you, Armin.
Thank you, Ishan. Okay, well, we have unexpectedly a fair amount of drought and heat, which are affecting crops. Food prices have been spiking. We have storm losses. Insurers are skittish about protecting the climate and fostering alternative and renewable energy. Forests are vulnerable. There are bark beetles that are intruding into forests in a large way. Coral reefs are dying. Oceans are being acidified. Lakes and other surface waters are drying up, which affect our drinking water supply. We have a loss of Arctic sea ice. 3.2% are lost per decade. Warmer oceans disrupt marine ecosystems and global fisheries. So we have more storms, more hurricanes, melting land ice, melting glaciers, many cyclones such as Cyclone Yas. We have to deal with all this. There is a lower snow cover. Snow melts earlier than before. Dhaka, the capital of capital of Bangladesh is underwater part of the time. So that is definitely an issue. There's a fair amount of species extinction, loss of biodiversity. The answer is zero emissions, clean energy. We want to, politically, for example, we want to make sure that the United States and Russia have joint access to the Arctic oil fields after the melting glaciers. So that's a political issue which we have to solve politically. Forest fires are burgeoning in the Amazon, Australia, Indonesia, India, and the United States. So these are issues we have to pay attention to, and I think I'll pass to other people.
Thank you so much, Armin, and thank you for casting such a wide net and truly how environment affects everyone in all of these various ways. I really like the notion of bringing politics of it, bringing sciences of it, sociology of it, arts and architecture of it, and built an environment all around us within the same ambit of environment, because the way forward is interdisciplinarity. The way forward is a holistic look at the world. And that being said, I will, again, it is my absolute pleasure to have our founding dean of OP Jindal Global University. And as I mentioned earlier, a true visionary when it comes to the way education should be rolled out, how environment should be looked at from various angles. And I would not be wrong in saying that the way the recent view of the world that we have at OP Jindal Global University is all because of Professor C. Raj Kumar. So it is my absolute pleasure, sir, to hand over the baton to you and for you to deliver your welcome address.
All right. Thank you very much, Ishan. Well, first of all, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who are part of this program on behalf of OP Jindal Global University and the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability. It is my proud privilege to extend greetings and wishes to all of us as we mark the celebration of the World Environment Day. We also have great pleasure in inviting all of you to this virtual seminar on the theme, the future of our planet, environment, climate change, and sustainability. As you heard, the Dean of the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, Professor Armin Rosencranz, painting obviously a very dim picture about the state of the world in which we are living and the extraordinary challenges that we are facing as we speak. I would like to begin by essentially saying that obviously we are facing a crisis, but before I speak about the environmental crisis that we are facing, let me quickly reflect about the global pandemic and the extraordinary health crisis that we are facing as we battle the challenges of COVID-19. As all of us since March 2020 woke up to a rude and shocking awakening of what the world has begun to face, and it is continuing unabated. But one of the remarkable things about the COVID-19 crisis is also the ability of humanity to fight it out and to demonstrate resilience in spite, or rather notwithstanding, significant odds. There are numerous stories of inspiring contributions, one of which is educators themselves. Imagine a moment, let me take you to, say, 100 years ago, in 1921, or more than 100 years ago, around 100 years ago, you can say, in 1921, when the world was facing the Spanish flu. During the Spanish flu, the entire world simply could not function. Nothing could actually happen. In fact, today I read a very interesting story about a person who's 100 years old and who's right now here, and he's a lawyer in the state of Rajasthan. And he heard when he was growing up about the story of the Spanish flu. And essentially at that time, the world came to a standstill because nothing was able to function. Today, 100 years later, as we are facing this pandemic, the role of educators has been phenomenal as well. Due to scientific and technological advances, a lot of the things that we could not have imagined 100 years ago, we are continuing, even this virtual webinar. Schools, colleges, universities across the world, despite all its challenges, including several disparities, including access to electricity, Wi-Fi connection, and gadgets, have been able to continue to a large extent the educational imagination despite all those challenges. In some ways, the most inspiring part of the pandemic itself is the ability of us as human beings to develop a sense of collective consciousness and to rise above the kind of differences that we might have and to face these challenges. Typically, producing a vaccine in any context takes 15 to 20 years. Scientific estimates across the world has recognized that it takes minimum 10 years, sometimes 15 years to create a vaccine. Because of the extraordinary advancement in science and technology and the hard work, commitment, dedication of the scientists of the world, we were able to have a vaccine in less than 1 year. Just imagine for a moment how much humanity has advanced in not only being resilient, but also resisting the challenges posed by the global pandemic. So I strongly believe that humanity and all of us as people, despite the dim picture that Armin had portrayed, and it is indeed true, we have the ability to rise above these challenges and indeed confront the climate change and the environmental crisis that all of us are facing. It is in this context that the role of universities become absolutely critical. Let me articulate as to why the universities ought to be the center of the imagination surrounding promoting the cause of environment, sustainability, and addressing the challenge of climate change. First, universities are expected to be institutions which are engaged in knowledge creation, which are supposed to be engaged in research. And this is where a lot of developments are going to take place. In fact, the research culture of universities have the potential to address some of the most compelling and significant issues that we are facing with regard to environment. Universities are also about transformative ideas, those ideas which can seek change and seek development in that system. And so as we face this crisis, I strongly believe that universities have a very significant role to play because of the responsibility attached to knowledge creation and research. Second, universities are also about questioning ideas. It's about challenging status quo. In this regard, what we have all been used to doing for a while, these aspects of our life have to be questioned, have to be challenged. And there is no other place in the world other than universities that our fundamental ethos and beliefs and values and our status quo can be challenged, can be questioned. And those ideas can form the foundations for the change that we are seeking. Third, universities are constantly about engaging with young people who are going to be future leaders. Imagine a country like India with 1.35 billion people. Imagine a situation where 900 million people of this 1.35 billion people are less than 35 years of age. Just imagine for a moment, these 900 million people are going to be, the Indian life expectancy is around 75. So the young people of India are not only going to shape the future of India, but will be shaping the future of the world. So what we teach in universities, the culture that we establish in academic institutions are not only going to change the present, but has immense potential to change the future. And that is why I am hopeful that the future is going to be driven the possibility of change that these young people are going to make. Fourth, universities are about speaking truth to power, raising uncomfortable questions with a view to seeking and changing and transforming. This is one of the most significant aspects of university life, and that is exactly what scholars do. In fact, many a time, some of the most compelling ideas have come through university corridors because university professors, university students, university researchers are prepared to ask those difficult questions, those extremely complex questions. It's also about challenging ideas, which I talked about earlier, but it is also about an imagination in which it is constantly involved in speaking truth to power, but also engaging with organizations, institutions. In fact, universities are about creating opportunity for a platform in which a significant degree of stakeholder consensus can be built around the possibility of interacting with non-governmental organizations, intergovernmental organizations, think tanks, research institutions. Of course, judiciary as an institution, which our dear friend Justice Michael Wilson is part of, and also policy-making bodies. In fact, the possibility of what universities can do is extraordinary because it provides somewhat of a neutral platform, an impartial platform, something that is deeply embedded in academic and intellectual rigor, is deeply embedded in objectivity. And that is constantly critical about the status quo and providing constructive new solutions, new imaginations for addressing the challenge of environment and also the climate change. Lastly, universities have a deeper sense of responsibility. In fact, almost all other institutions are driven through certain specific agendas, including politicians, for example, or for that matter, non-governmental organizations, even NGOs, they have a specific mandate and a specific agenda. Even judiciary, I dare say, have a specific agenda to advance the cause of justice, and justice could be interpreted in numerous ways. But universities have this extraordinary ability to have penetrating ideas and to be critical and constructive at the same time, to be able to have nuanced perspectives that transcend the decision-making processes of a judiciary, of a government agency, of non-governmental organizations, of media, of think tanks. And in that sense, universities have a deeper sense of responsibility as to evaluating ideas, not based on dogma or ideology, but something that has strong scientific evidence and at the same time has also social and community level impact. So these five perspectives that I just articulated makes the role of universities quite significant, quite important. I also want to say that one of the things that a character of a university promotes is the sense of interdisciplinarity that is deeply embedded in the culture of a university. We are very fortunate at Jindal Global University that since the day one, when we established the law school in 2009, and now we have 10 different schools in business, international affairs, public policy, liberal arts, journalism, architecture, banking and finance, environment and sustainability, and most recently, the 10th school, the Jindal School of Psychology and Counseling. Just imagine how much each of these schools and their curriculum and their programs and their faculty and their research agendas are interconnected, even when we discuss the subject of environment. So interdisciplinarity and the study of environment and climate change through its ability to impact the society at large is critical, and that is the function which universities ought to play. And we are very fortunate that the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability is providing that institutional leadership in advancing the cause. I also want to say that we're very fortunate that we have widespread collaborative initiatives that have been promoted in this field. We work very closely with the WWF in India and also a host of organizations that we are partnering with. In fact, our distinguished judge, Honorable Mr. Justice Michael Wilson, Judge of the Supreme Court of Hawaii, and his colleagues at the Supreme Court of Hawaii have provided opportunities for our students to pursue clerkships there. And some of those students, inspired by the work that Justice Michael Wilson does, have been part of a collaborative initiative advancing the cause through IUCN and a number of other global environmental initiatives. So in a way, the possibility for young people to seek change is absolutely significant. Lastly, I want to say that when we are a part of any causes, it is quite natural for us to be subsumed by the power of those causes. And that includes on matters related to human rights, environmental justice, climate change, and a number of others. But it is also equally important for us as responsible individuals to constantly look at debates and discussions surrounding it and not to dismiss other ideas just because we don't agree with it. One of the things that universities ought to be doing is to promote the possibility of people to disagree on issues and debate about them and test those ideas on science and logic and rationality. And that's an area where, unfortunately, on any powerful issue, the global discourse provides little opportunity for views to be expressed. One's views are mirrored by one's ideologies, and at times that leads to a cacophony of sounds as opposed to light. And so what one needs to do when we are addressing these issues is to be conscious of a sense of polarization that becomes an outcome when you deal with these issues. So I'm very delighted today that as we mark the celebration of the World Environment Day, the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability has taken an initiative to organize this virtual seminar. I'm also eagerly looking forward to welcoming the class of students who will be joining this year again in the Bachelor of Arts Honors in Environmental Studies. We pride in the fact that we are a non-STEM, non-medicine university, which has a strong relevance for studies relating to environment that transcend the scientific aspects of environmental studies. We strongly believe that issues surrounding regulation, policy, and governance relating to the study of environment is absolutely important, including law, that we're going to hear more from Michael. So with those words, I want to thank and congratulate Professor Armin Rosencranz, the founding dean of the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, Professor Ishan, who has taken a lot of effort to organize this seminar, and of course, my dear friend, Justice Michael Wilson, and many other professors and colleagues who are. And the seminar is so beautifully organized with sessions on economics of climate change, scientific feasibility of conservation mechanisms, social impact of waste and its governance, all happening today. And then we have the fourth thematic session, which focused on what Glasgow holds, the future of international environmental agreements. And we end with a valedictory and plenary session in which we have Honorable Mr. Justice Swatantra Kumar, former distinguished chairperson of the National Green Tribunal, and Professor Maharaj Pandit, former head in Department of Environmental Studies at the University of Delhi, both of whom will be joining us in our valedictory session. With those words, thank you to all of you, and we look forward to the proceedings of this seminar.
Thank you so much, Raj sir. Again, you have covered everything that environment stands for, and your stress on the importance of educators and the importance of universities, almost this Bentham-esque idea that clash of ideas leads to new ideas, and we must be critical, but also be constructive. We must engage, but also appeal to the other person's rationality while engaging. And all of these are building blocks of environment. And these are the issues that we'll be dealing with throughout the day, as Raj sir mentioned. So that being done, it is now my absolute pleasure to invite Justice Michael Wilson, Judge, Supreme Court of Hawaii, and all of you who have attended our sessions earlier or have visited the university, you know that Justice Wilson is extremely supportive of all of our efforts, all of the efforts of youth from around the globe. And while his designation says that he is a judge of the Supreme Court of Hawaii, let me tell you that he is as big an advocate of climate action as any of us. He is a student of environmental law still, something that he stresses on, and he is one of the most engaging speakers that we will witness. So that being said, thank you so much, Justice Wilson, for being here, and absolutely delighted to have you amongst us. Over to you, Justice Wilson.
Aloha and namaste. This is what we say in Hawaii, aloha, that recognizes the spirit that we all have, a spirit that allows us to live a life where we can recognize great beauty and recognize love and recognize friendship. And it's a word that we equate with namaste, a word that also recognizes the beautiful spirit in all of us. I have to give my very, very deep appreciation to Professor Chaturvedi. Ishan, thank you so much. You've been doing a great job organizing this all the way from Hawaii. And one of my heroes is Armin Rosencranz, whose materials I read for many years before I had the great privilege to meet him in person and to also search with him through the jungles of India to find a tiger. He was right there with me. And then the avatar of justice, Professor Kumar, who has been a great friend to Hawaii and has been the main reason why we've been able to have such a wonderful collaboration with the Supreme Court of India. And the Jindal Global University has strengthened the University of Hawaii because of the work he's done here. So I have been changed because of my relationship with India and Jindal, and I've also been changed because I've had great students from the Jindal Global Law School that have come to my court, and not just my court, but the courts of my colleagues as well. So the power of the culture of India has been very strong here in Hawaii for some time. So I'm sitting here in my office in Hawaii at the Supreme Court. As you can see, I'm with Ma Druga, my favorite of all the Hindu gods or goddesses, and this was a great gift that I received from Justice Swatantra Kumar, who's one of the great justices, not just in India, but he's made a big difference here in Hawaii because he's been here and helped us with the development of our environmental court. Why do I explain all this? Because I feel like I'm there with you in a way. I was with you not too long ago, the last time I traveled in March of 2000 and hands with so many and put my arms around so many people in India who I respect. So I'm glad to be back. And I feel very excited about this presentation. But let me confess that this presentation will have a very serious tone to it because I've been asked to speak about the future of our planet. And the environment, climate change, and sustainability. So let me move to a bit of a PowerPoint so that we can share together some thoughts. So here you see the beginning of our presentation. And Ishan, is that something that everybody can see now?
It is Justice Wilson.
Yes.
What is the title of this presentation? It says, set your sights on what? Restoration. Set your sights on restoration. I'm speaking of restoration, not sustainability. Now, this is a school, thank goodness, one of the great schools now in, I would submit, the universities of the world, your school of sustainability and the environment. It's a great school because it's so important, it's needed. It's a great school because it was one of the original schools to be established that would directly focus on the discipline of sustainability and the environment. However, let's talk a bit about what's happening in the world in terms of the three different types of resource management systems. Sustainability is a model that is reflected in the name of your college. We call it Pono, that's Hawaiian, meaning it's a good thing. Then we have exploitation. You can see exploitation is represented by a forest that's chopped down. Exploitation just means managing resources for short-term economic gain. If you have a forest, you cut it down, especially if you have a good market for it. And the economic consequences are wonderful because you can maximize your profit. The environmental consequences are terrible, and this happens in places which there are slashing and burning techniques for tropical forests, for example. So it leads to the demise of the environment. And what's the third? Restoration. The third model is restoration. We call it malama. Malama meaning to nurture, to bring back. You know, there's an adage that had been used during my lifetime quite a bit up until recently, in which there was a concept that we want to sustain natural resources. This is something the professors would say. We want to sustain natural resources. This is something that economists would say. We want to sustain natural resources for whom? For future generations. We want to pass on the resources in a manner that is sustained so that they're preserved for future generations. That era is over. Everybody in this audience is 40 years or younger. I apologize to you, and I confess, we're not sustaining resources. You wouldn't be in this college if you didn't realize this. So let's be frank about what the future requires in terms of resource management. We need to have restoration. We need to bring resources back in a very specific way. We need to do this for the planet, very specifically, restore resources. And I say this from Hawaii, the most remote landmass on Earth. This is an interesting slide. Gives you a chance to understand what is in the collective human consciousness, very likely the ideal environment on Earth, Hawaii. But we're fragile. We're islands. And as the ocean rises, we become more and more a community with India, a partnership with India. Because what is coming? What is coming with respect to climate change and the environment? The devastation that we are facing doesn't affect all places equally. There are countries, regions, cultures on the front line. You are in India on the front line. We'll talk about this. And we are in Hawaii on the front line. This is the most powerful, beautiful place I have ever been in my life. I went there in high school. It's in Hawaii. It's the Nepali coast. Beautiful beach with a waterfall that comes down to the beach. Its ocean is so clean, has the most powerful ecosystem on Earth. the most protein ecosystem, the most productive, and you probably know it is an underwater ecosystem called a coral ecosystem, which is right offshore. In 30 or 40 years, when your country is facing a crisis much greater than the pandemic, we will be facing a crisis too, and that beach will be gone. It'll be washed away by sea level rise. Oh my goodness, I hope, if nothing else, you all remember I'm inviting you to Hawaii. It's the most magnificent place. It's so beautiful. It doesn't have the cultural power maybe and some of the merely magnificent, powerful aspects of India that are a matter of faith and beauty, but it is really an amazing place. And this is our major city. If you don't come to Hawaii for 40 years, at least you'll remember this picture, because in 40 years, that beach will be washed away. That's Waikiki Beach. We're going to lose $2 billion a year. Our major economic engine is about to be washed away. What are we talking about here? I would suggest that because we all share this heartfelt commitment to a future, as Dean Kumar said, a future that's different than the one we're facing now, we all care about it. And we need leaders that can give us belief that we're going to be able to join together and change the future. Here is one of them, the Secretary General of the United Nations. And why was he speaking at this signature speech? And please take down the link for it. Oh my goodness, it's such a wonderful speech. Where is he speaking? He's speaking at an institution that followed your college. You established the College of the Environment and Sustainability some years ago, and after you, Columbia decided to do it. Columbia University has established a Department of the Environment, a Department of Sustainability, devoted to issues of the climate emergency that's coming. So they invited the Secretary General to speak, and he spoke. And what did he say? He said, the pandemic is an extraordinary crisis. It has brought society to its knees, but it is not as serious as what's coming. It is not as serious as the climate emergency that is upon us now. As he says, the disruption to economies, societies, and people caused by the COVID-19 will pale in comparison to what the climate crisis holds in store. Let's be specific. Why today are we talking about restoration? Why are we talking today about setting your sights, being specific, having a vision? Here's an example of somebody that has set their sights. Sir David King was one of the architects of the Paris Agreement and the 1.5 degree limit on global warming, along with Lawrence Fabius at the Paris Agreement in 2015. He is one of the great atmospheric scientists of the world. He has developed a new Center for Climate Repair at Cambridge University, where he is a noted professor. He was knighted by the Queen. And one of the two data points that he expresses virtually every week throughout the world has to do with India and Bangladesh. And what he says is, we are not meeting the Paris Agreement. We are not taking sufficient greenhouse gases out of the air. And at present trajectories, 160 million people have to leave Bangladesh within 40 or 50 years. It's worth thinking about that, because that will destabilize India. As he says, when that happens, the world order is all over. There'll be destabilization, the markets will start collapsing, the rule of law is likely to collapse, and will devolve into systems that are more autocratic systems where the politics of the world, the power structure is based more on military might and strength than it is on the rule of law. What he also says When I say also, as does the Secretary General, he says the difference between the coronavirus threat and the threat from global warming is that humanity can recover from the coronavirus. What is it that makes this issue so extraordinary? The issue I'm talking about is the climate emergency, global warming. What makes it so extraordinary? We only have a limited time to solve the problem. The solution horizon is limited. This is a different kind of social issue than we've ever seen before. Think to yourself about the fundamental social problems that humanity faces and how much time do we have to deal with it? Who has the best religion? 100 years ago, you would have one answer. I suppose at this point in time, you have a different answer. We've got a lot of time to work out who's got the best religion. Should we treat women equally? This is a big issue. We're still trying to work it out on Earth. We have time to work it out. We're working at the issue of, in the United States, should we be allowed to carry guns? This is a very big issue in the United States, as you know. We're so attached to our guns. We have legislation that comes and goes, and we work on this issue. We don't have time for the climate change issue. Once we get past 1.5 degrees, then we'll have done such damage to the Earth that the world as we know it will change. Now, this is not that significant an issue in a fundamental way to me, to Professor Rosencranz, to Professor Kumar. We're older than 40 years old. When I look at you, Ishan, and I think how young you are, and I think of the audience that I'm speaking to, it's one of the reasons I'm so excited to be here. You all are facing something we will never see at present levels of greenhouse gas emissions. We'll enjoy our life. We'll continue with a life of high consumption, and we'll pass on this world that is not being sustained in its natural resources. So we need to move to restoration for you if you're under 40 years old. Set your sights on 1.5 degrees. What do I mean, set your sights? Set your sights means get focused and believe in yourself, even though you're working against the odds. So let me ask you about Mahatma Gandhi and what people thought of him in March of 1930. March of 1930, remember, that's when he started his trek across India, 241-mile trek, with the idea of a crackpot, with the idea of somebody that doesn't make sense, with the idea of somebody you wouldn't want to believe in, because he was thinking he was going to cause the greatest military power on the planet to leave India. Great Britain was going to leave India because he started walking by, essentially by himself at the beginning. But he believed in something. He believed that a small body of determined spirits fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission can alter the course of history. So Mahatma Gandhi set his sights. He set his sights on justice. He set his sights on the idea that there should be equal opportunity. There should be an opportunity to be treated fairly and equally in terms of the way the government treats its citizens, the way resources are distributed, the way that we punish people, the way we take their freedom away. He believed in that and he set his sights. And of course, now it doesn't seem that unusual because he accomplished it. You are in the shoes of Mahatma Gandhi. You are facing something that society has never seen before. This is the great metaphor, the heroic metaphor, and of course, the hero is in all of our hearts, of David and Goliath. And David had to focus when he was confronted by this giant, and he swung his slingshot with a rock in it, and he threw the rock, and it went directly to the right spot, which was right between the eyes of the Goliath. This is a real important image because this is you if you're under 40. This is you if you're at the School of Environment and Sustainability. This is you alive on the planet now. And you've got a chance. Now you've got 6 or 7 years maybe. So as Professor Kumar has said, and as Armin Rosencranz has represented with his life, do not accept the status quo. Don't be afraid to question the status quo, particularly now, because it's your survival that's at stake, not the least of which is your survival. More important than your survival is if you plan to have a family. There are people that have come before you. These are the recent global environmental defenders that you know about. If I could, I wish I was there, I'd ask you, raise your hand if you've heard of Greta Thunberg. Of course you have. She's like a Mahatma Gandhi. She is an environmental defender that believes that what's happening now is wrong. The status quo is not recognizing the emergency, and she demands that her generation be protected, and she organizes, and as a consequence, people are becoming politically organized that are young people. Who's the fellow to the left with this rather serious look on his face? Roger Hallum. So look at the YouTube for Roger Hallum, and it will make you know that life, as Professor Kumar has said, life can be an adventure in the right direction. If you set your sights, you can help restore our planet so it doesn't heat to 1.5 degrees. Roger Hallum created an organization called, and you probably have it on the tip of your tongue, it's going viral, it's going global, it's called Extinction Rebellion. Middle-class people, mothers, middle-class mothers are joining his organization. It started in England, and what do? One case involved middle-class mothers gluing themselves to the airport floor in Heathrow, and they were prosecuted in court. And Sir David King came in as an expert to explain what it is they were trying to do when they said they're trying to protect their children. He explained to the court that they are engaging in civil disobedience that's meant to protect the planet and all of us. And they won the case. That's just one example. Citizen activism. If you're part of a school of sustainability and the environment, of course you have to understand the science, and we're talking a bit about that. Of course you do. But you have no hope if all you understand is the science. No hope. We can't just wring our hands and watch the scientific inevitability of the earth heat up because of the amount of greenhouse gases we're putting in the air. And that is one of the reasons why I would submit you have great opportunity to do more than just learn about the science, because you are students of Armin Rosencranz. You are students of Raj Kumar. You are students of people that know that courage, commitment, and good character, honesty, can do extraordinary things, just like Mahatma Gandhi did. But your school is about character. All the knowledge you have, all the wealth you may have is going to be ineffective in protecting the earth unless you have good character. And you know the theme of the Jindal Global University. Anyways, do the right thing anyways. If everybody else is corrupt, you just do the right thing anyways. If everybody else who is in charge of the economic system, the capitalist system right now, is looking at it short term and doesn't care about you enough to get greenhouse gases out of the air, be leaders. Be an authentic global environmental defender, but keep in mind what the stakes are. This is a special rapporteur for the United Nations for environmental defenders. His name is John Knox. He put in, for the United Nations, he put together a fascinating, amazing report that talked about environmental defenders being murdered 2 a week. Now it's up to 3. I know that people in India are brave. I've been around the students. They are so brave, they come all the way to Hawaii to try to learn and help protect the planet. But our bravery, I shouldn't say our, judges don't have to be brave, really. Judges just, everybody thinks that they're smart. Everybody gives them credit. It's a very nice life. So judicial independence should be easy. Judges need to do the right thing under the law, even if it means that they're not pleasing the powerful, pleasing special interests. But these are the true heroes, the true courageous, often indigenous people that stand up for their rainforests, stand up for their rivers, stand up for their lakes, stand up for their animals, stand up for their planet, and get killed. So when you are at the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, it is such a wonderful statement about a commitment to these individuals. This is one of the great environmental defenders of our contemporary era, Edwin Chota. I flew to his village in Peru. He stood up for the rainforest, these sacred mahogany trees. He organized to stop the illegal harvesting of these trees. He organized not just in the Amazon rainforest in Peru. He was a very charismatic person that got attention from all around the world. And then he and his father-in-law were murdered. This is his wife who took over. She didn't give up. And this little forest, this little village in this massive forest does not have a lot of protection for people like Edwin Chota and like Diana Rios, his wife. But they keep going. They keep working at it. And when you go to the school, you become empowered with knowledge and empowered with sophistication about politics. And you have the opportunity to make a big difference for somebody like Diana as a special expert, as an advisor, as a writer, as a commentator, so that their lives are not sacrificed and for the planet without a reason. The gentleman you see on the left who's meeting with Diana Rios is also meeting with a human rights lawyer in Peru. He is one of the great justices in the world. He's from Colombia, wrote a great decision giving the rights of a human being to the Amazon in Peru. Luis Tolosa is his name. And you can see Diana with one of her villages, one of the other villagers, and right between the two of them, see the man carrying those books? He is a very brave human rights lawyer from Peru who for free does this work and gets threatened for doing it. This kind of courage is what defines the future if we're going to have a good future. And this is our future right now. I've been to, New Delhi's famous for being the city that's got the worst environment on earth, except once in a while there's a pocket in Mongolia that's comparable. This is what India is becoming famous for. And India has produced the final stand. I think India is likely to be famous for moving forward and being a leader and protecting our planet because of the kind of courage that the citizens have, the amount of political freedom you still have. What is the final stand? It's a group of students, many of them trained by Professor Rosencranz, who decided they aren't going to allow this to happen without a struggle. They are going to set their sights on keeping the earth from heating up to 1.5 degrees. And this is Jindal. This is the Jindal Global University. And as Ishan has said, and Ishan's been an inspiration for them too, this is becoming a very important leadership group in the world who often help me. So there you've got the link to the website. There they are. And this is in Professor Kumar's office with the final stand and with attorneys that help the final stand. And if you look to the right of this picture, the lady standing there is my colleague from the Supreme Court of Hawaii, who came to Jindal just as inspired as me and was with the Final Stand students. What are they doing? They're organizing all around India to provide information and to provide leadership to keep the earth from heating up to 1.5 degrees. Because getting back to the similarity between India and Hawaii, we're on the front line. Our cities are going to be flooded, but your experience is becoming one of the more dramatic and one of the more terrifying on earth, not just because of the fact so many people are going to be leaving Bangladesh and invading India, but also because of the hothouse effect, the number of young people that are dying because of heat prostration. And it is starting to be an exponential increase. You read about it, and that's one thing the Final Stand has in mind. Then, you know, what happens when the body heats up to in a temperature of 120, 125 degrees is it cooks from the inside out. And who cooks first, a child or a mother? The child does. And this is why mothers are starting to become motivated to say we have to get greenhouse gases out of the air, especially mothers that have children die of heat prostration. The female part of our population, the mothers, are so critical to trying to bring compassion, try to bring love, try to bring human understanding to the massive suffering, unprecedented suffering that you're going to go through unless you're extremely elite, extremely wealthy. You can retreat to different areas in the world that are available to just the wealthy and the powerful. But those of us that are left behind are going to have a very severe life. And it is a life that doesn't have to be that severe. We don't have to have that loss of life. But to be able to survive as a species, we need women. We need women to step forward. I had my life saved by women. We had a war in the United States called the Vietnam War. We sent 50,000 men to Vietnam that died. They were killed in the war. Our leaders misrepresented to us what the war was about. The duplicity finally came out, or the lack of truth finally came out to the public at large. And our political and military leaders, just like the leaders in the world are doing now and continuing to perpetrate greenhouse gas emissions at a level that's unacceptable, our leadership in the United States just kept sending people, and I was drafted. So I was going to be in the next group of men that are supposed to go fight in Vietnam. But by that time, the mothers in the United States knew that what was being done by the government was not fair, it wasn't honest, it wasn't true, and they stepped forward and said, that's it, we're not sending our sons to die in Vietnam anymore. And that was the tipping point. So I didn't have to go. The draft ended. So when you think about your future, you think about the future of children, whether they're born or unborn with you, look towards women and their leadership and the mothers to step forward. Young people are getting together all over the world, but it's definitely happening in Hawaii and in India. These are pictures that just show the collaboration between Jindal and the University of Hawaii. And the kind of collaboration that's taking place, the kind of efforts that are being implemented by young people are finally starting to get to the true powers capable of deciding this issue, the energy producers. This is a slide that points out that now young people have organized their wealth and become influential board members for Exxon, influential board members for Chevron, and they are insisting that the companies cut the carbon emissions. This is exactly the kind of tactic that's available to somebody from the Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability, because you will be empowered with knowledge about what's happening, and you'd be able to articulate why assets should be gathered now to save the planet so we'll have assets in the future. You don't have to have compassion for your fellow human beings. You don't have to have a concern for biodiversity and the magnificence of the planet that we live on. You can just be motivated by raw greed But if you're 30 years old, you won't be able to manifest your greed. You'll lose your chance to manifest your greed because the capitalist system will erode. So those greed merchants that control this issue, if you're a young greed merchant, you have a reason to get greenhouse gases out of the air because we can do it. It's not going to destabilize our economy. We all know there's this incredible billion-dollar economy that's already given birth all over the world. And it's an economy that has to do with alternative energy, just like Professor Rosencranz said at the beginning of his lecture. We can do it if we can get past this idea that we have to sustain the traditional means of those that are most wealthy. Okay, well, just briefly, this is the most important issue facing judges. It's an issue that has brought together the Environmental Court of Hawaii is formed in part to deal with these powerful environmental issues. The greatest environmental court in the history of the world used to be the Green Tribunal. Unfortunately, it has deteriorated since Justice Kumar left. But this is one of the great Chief Justices of India who's I've heard speak about this issue of protecting the planet in a way that's so eloquent. Justice Kumar came to Hawaii, worked with our court. This is our court over here on the left, all of our justices, and you can see Justice Kumar was there as well. Justice Sikri, another one of your great justices. I'm just gonna, this is a confusing slide maybe, but just remember, all these words represent an extraordinary change through the law. This is a whole group of cases that have been decided within the last 24 months, all over the world. Now, we don't have a really strong case yet from India, but they're coming from Germany, they're coming from France, they're coming from the Netherlands, they're coming from the Philippines, they're coming from Colombia. These are cases saying your generation should have a chance. You should be allowed to survive, and the law should give you opportunities to come to court and hold those accountable that are knowingly taking away your future. Unfortunately, you've got to deal with the United States. We have a renegade federal court. Let me give you an example of the power that you have, whether you're a lawyer or whether you're just somebody that's an expert, can have enormous power testifying. The first case you see about the $2 billion verdict, that's a $2 billion verdict against a company. It didn't have to do with climate change. It had to do with a defective product, talc powder being used by primarily women and causing cancer. But a jury, if you can write down that word, jury has so much power. The jury in the United States awarded $2 billion, and so far the courts have let it stand all the way up to the Supreme Court. It wasn't a climate case, so in some ways it didn't have the same impact in terms of the power interests in the United States. But it shows, can you imagine what will happen if finally a case comes before a jury in the United States, or finally a case comes before a bold enough, courageous judge to tell the truth in India about the damage that's being done by those that knowingly put too many greenhouse gases in the air? It's an incredible power because you could bankrupt a company. It raises the risk. Companies don't like risk. They want to avoid risk. So they'll change their investment practices to avoid risk. This other case from the Fourth Circuit in Hawaii is just an example of how we need the citizen activists. We need people to step forward, particularly in the United States, because our Supreme Court is rendering decisions now that eliminate, reduce, minimize, erode the opportunities for your generation to get relief. Now, the states, I'm in a state, Hawaii, we have a state court system. Our states are more amenable to this, but the federal courts are a threat to you as well as to us. And you can do something about it by organizing and making your interests known. I'm concluding now by talking about those who are capable of setting their sights on restoration. Now you have an enormous power in India with an independent judiciary. And this gentleman, Justice Dhananjaya Chandrachud, represents courage, a beautiful spirit, and fortunately, he's on the Supreme Court of India and will soon become the Chief Justice. If you are an expert in a case that's being brought, or you're part of a community and you're able to articulate the need to attend to this emergency that we call the climate emergency. Basically, it's simple. It's an emergency that has to do with just getting a certain amount of greenhouse gases out of the air. That's what's so inspiring and wonderful and hopeful about all this. The solution is not like trying to convince society who's got the best religion. The solution is not like trying to convince society that we should treat immigrants with respect and decency. The truth of the solution isn't as complicated as whether we should treat women equally. All these issues that are soft social issues we have so much trouble with in humanity. The most important issue facing humanity has got a beautiful, clean, clear solution. You just take greenhouse gases out of the air, and to some extent, we may have to cool the earth, but you can't let the earth heat up to 1.5 degrees. When you have the opportunity to use the rule of law, and you won't have the opportunity much longer, maybe 40 or 50 years, but when you've got the opportunity to employ the rule of law in the courtroom of somebody like Dhananjaya Chandrachud, it's like you're in the presence of Mahatma Gandhi. You've got a chance, so don't give up. Go to court, organize your community, and maybe you'll even be able to go to your executive branch and your legislative branch. You know, we're not talking about anger here. We're not talking about dislike. We're not talking about hatred. We're talking about trying to care about each other. Now, this is the Pope, and this is a little boy, but step back and think about what you're doing when you go to this college of the environment, this college of sustainability. It's a college based on the most beautiful human values. You're trying to protect, you're trying to preserve what? The magnificence of life, biodiversity, the planet, but just as importantly, we're trying to take care of each other, right? At least have land, air, and water that allows somebody like this little person to have a decent life. So it's a wonderful David versus Goliath, little gorilla versus giant, hero story that you're involved in. I'm sorry that you, if you're under 40, are the David and not the Goliath. I'm sorry if you're under 40 and you're young and you don't happen to be a billionaire, you don't happen to have enormous power, that you're in the role of the little gorilla, having to go up against the powers that be. But there's an excitement in the adventure, and you're being given the tools, you're being given the skills, you're being given the power by going to this college that allows you to participate and stand up for the planet and stand up for the children of India. This is, let's see if I can get to the next slide. Okay. Can you still see this slide, Ishan?
Yes, it is visible.
This is a really important slide to me because I found the tiger in India with Professor Rosencranz, with Professor Kumar. We looked and looked and we finally found it. If you can have wild tigers in India, it is a testament, a celebration of the earth. It is an example of things being okay. And the fact that India is such an old culture and you still have the tiger means there are some things embedded in your culture that have a lot to do with a symbol like Druga. In India, nature is God. In India, nature is faith. In India, nature is an inspiration in itself, not just to make profit. And I think that's one reason we still have tigers, and that tiger symbolizes that value for the whole world. If we can have respect for an animal like that, as dangerous as it is, as wild as it is, but as beautiful and magnificent, it shows that our value system is still healthy and hopefully can bring us to the point where we have a world that is as magnificent as parts of it are now. And so I'm going to say aloha and namaste. I'm at the end of my remarks, and I'm so grateful to have been here. You can see from this picture what I get a chance to be inspired by on a regular basis in Hawaii. So thank you all for being part of this team that Ishan and Professor Rosencranz and Professor Kumar are putting together. It's a team of enormous importance to the whole world. Your team at the College of Environment and Sustainability. I wish I was there with you so I could see you in person and shake your hand and thank you, but I will thank you for all the work you're going to do in the future and for allowing me for a moment to be part of this. I have to brag a little bit and tell you that I am an adjunct faculty member of the Jindal Global Law School. And so in many ways, I am part of what Jindal is all about. And I try not to take too much credit for it, but it does make me feel good to think that I'm part of your team. So aloha to all of you, and I wish you the very best. Aloha and namaste.
Thank you so much, Justice Wilson. Thank you so much, Professor Raj, and thank you, Dr. Rosencranz. And before we move on to the next session, we'll take a short break. But before I do that, let me just quickly recapitulate everything that Justice Wilson has covered for us. He's discussed the global nature of the crisis, the climate crisis, the role of law, the role of science, the role of consciousness, the role of youth. He's talked about how the current pandemic pales in front of the climate change crisis that we are facing and that we will be facing. He said that there will be a serious tone to the discussion, and he did strike that chord. He also, because he's so inherently optimistic, also created this light and this halo of positivity about how we can still work towards it. He talked about the multifocal lens that needs to be used when you're looking at climate crisis. But I think most importantly, he talked about the prioritization of issues. He talked about how there will always be issues, but it is important to rationally prioritize the issues. And today, our priority has to be climate action. And on that note, when we're talking about how, when he spoke about we have time to look at other issues, but no time to look at climate action, we have to look at it right now. I just want to carry that string of thought forward. And as we head into the break, draw a very short analogy between time and environment, because that's what Justice Wilson referred to earlier. Time has been here before humanity. Time will be here after us. So has environment. Time is a construct that we've created to help ourselves understand the concept, which is the same as environment. Time is a lot bigger than what we perceive it to be, and so is environment. We're always catching up on time. As we're trying to catch up on environment. We're always trying to save more time as we're trying to conserve our environment. And time eventually is money. And there is a huge element of economics of environment as well, which coincidentally is our next session with Professor Majumdar of Jindal Global University chairing that session. So we'll be back in exactly 2 minutes with all of you. We'll take a small session break. And we'll come up with the next session on economics of climate change in 2 minutes. Thank you again, Justice Wilson, Dr. Rosencranz, Professor Dr. Raj Kumar. It was a pleasure having you, and thank you for setting the tone for the World Environment Day seminar today. Thank you so much.